Yo guys, what's going on? Lucky Cheese 7 is here today to give you guys a live stream discussion on Chainsaw Man Chapter 100, the big milestone point for Tatsuki Fujimoto and for Chainsaw Man. Now, I do want to say one thing. This chapter came out last Tuesday, and I mentioned on Twitter, which, if anyone wants to get my updates, Twitter's the best place to be. But all I want to say is the day the chapter came out, I was going out of town for a few days. So I told myself probably around Friday or Saturday, I'll do a little live stream discussion regarding my thoughts on the chapter. Time I got back, let's just say I needed to just recover for a few days. So that kind of set me off course for a bit. But regardless, I'm here talking about chapter 100, and there was a lot of expectations before chapter 100, if I'm being perfectly honest. Um, the best way I can describe it is that you had a lot of people who were like super hyped about it, and then when they read the chapter, it was like, hmm. And then you had certain people go like, actually, this was kind of refreshing for a milestone chapter. And for me, I thought it was kind of interesting because to me it kind of shows that just because it's a big uh milestone point for the story in terms of chapter lengths, it doesn't necessarily always mean that the 100th chapter, the 50th chapter, whenever you hit certain chapter numbers in a story, sometimes it doesn't matter. And that's kind of how I'm viewing Fujimoto here with chapter 100, where it's like it doesn't feel like there's a lot, but at the same time, it kind of does, and I'm going to explain how. So, the chapter starts off. It's called, chapter 100. How to walk, shoot. I thought, see, at first when I read the chapter title, I thought it said how to walk on shoe, on shoeless. I didn't realize it said how to walk shoeless. But essentially, you have Asa walking with her two new club members. You got Yoshida, obviously, who was pretty synonymous in part one with the screen time that we got of him, and then we have this other character named Yuko, I believe, and then they introduce themselves in this particular chapter too. But you have her say, "Would devils really be inside a school?" And then Yoshida says, "This is the biggest school in Tokyo. Supposedly, devils sometimes live in the unused classrooms." And interesting note about Yoshida here is that anytime he's having these type of conversations, like you notice how his eyes are kind of covered by his bangs. It kind of reminds me of Chad in certain cases. Like if anybody remembers Chad from Bleach, 95% of the time Chad's eyes would be like covered by his bangs. That's kind of what I'm getting from Yoshida. But we do see his eyes because when the chapter starts off, we see his like eye, his right eye over here in the corner. So the fact that it's like almost like covered up, I know. I do feel like it's a little bit intentional here, but that said, you have Yuko. Like it's funny because as soon as he says supposedly devils sometimes live inside unused classrooms, then Yuko says, "Huh? Dot dot dot." Oh, like you see how that catches her attention, and then she says, "We never introduced ourselves. I'm Yuko. I'm s- I'm super into Chainsaw Man lately." Yoshida says, "I'm Yoshida. Chainsaw Man's great, right? I like him too." And poor Asa. Oh my god. She's like, Asa, Asa Mitaka. And then she's just having just kind of like that inner thought, like, this sucks. Why'd I have to get teamed up with him? awkward much. I want to bail. I'm not the one who asked him out. Because if you're going based off chapter two, War Devil was like, "Hey, want to be my little play toy?" That's essentially what happened. Let's be real. That's essentially what happened. You know, but you see that, and then Yuko says, "Do you like Chainsaw Man, Asa?" And she's like, Can't time move any faster?" Like as much as the average person. And here's the thing: these three particular panels right here that we get, um, we kind of get a little bit of a close up on Yuko's face. And I know the big popular theory, especially after chapter two, was that could Yuko possibly be Denji in disguise? And I forget where I saw this, but there's something in particular that Denji has. And we see Yuko having the same thing. So, I mean, you could say it's coincidental that it's similar, but I don't know. With how Fujimoto writes his story and the way he panels everything out, I mean, look, after Look Back and Goodbye Eri, the man is just on another level when it comes to, you know, panel like storyboarding and dialogue and, just showcasing what he wants to write. It's honestly incredible. So Denji being Yuko isn't something, or vice versa, Yuko being Denji is something I could see Fujimoto pull off. It's not a stretch to consider that because I mean they look similar too. I say look similar, but I have also heard stuff that she could be related to another one of the characters too. Who really knows? But it is still interesting how we're three chapters in and we're still focusing on Asa as the protagonist, which I'm totally fine with. But you're noticing Asa have these expressions, and then she looks directly over at Yuko, and then gets a little thrown out because you see her classmates walk by. They're from my class, and one of them notices her and just walks past her, and you're seeing like sweat like boil off of Asa, and these girls, these I don't even know what to call them. Hoes. There we go. Let's say that. These uh let's go with okay, let's be more lenient here. Let's go with preps. These preps over here are like, ugh, she has some nerve trying to get a boyfriend so soon after what she did. She can totally hear you. Like, you ever get that trope in like high school where you have like like the underdog cheerleader, and then you have like the queen bee cheerleader. It's kind of like that, where yep, also the underdog, and then you have these girls who are just like, huh, look at her, so stupid. And again, just the detailing that Fujimoto puts into his art, like you can like actually see the sweat like dripping off of Asa's face, because oftentimes when you see sweat in manga specifically, it's like a tiny little drop. Here, Fujimoto like actually puts the detail in with the sweat, and like you're actually seeing it like actually like fall off for, which is interesting. And Yoshida says, "What's up with them?" Yuko says, "Beats me." The second that happens, Asa raises her hand, which Yuko notices, and she says, "I just remembered something I have to do." Yoshida's like, well, actually, they're both kind of like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? What's wrong? I just remembered It's something I have to do. I gotta go. Hey, wait, Asa, and this is what really got to me. From an emotional standpoint of the chapter, simply put, is the callback to chapter one with what happened to Bucky, and you're kind of seeing how this is kind of having like a mental breakdown, if you will, for Asa. Like she's walking through, she's remembering what happened with their classmates, going over to her locker, and this, oh, I could not believe this shit that was happening with Asa because Yugo notices and says, Asa, wait, what's wrong? Are you okay? And the preps, if you will, ultimately what they did is they threw meat on her shoes and like raw, slimy meat. And look, meat is cool and all, but when you're putting shit like that in the locker, especially, ooh, it's gonna stink for a while. And Yuko pointed like, oh yikes, that's raw meat. And then you got an expressionless Asa. I'm fine. What? That's what Yuko says. Are you sure about that? I'm fine. Hey! She's walking away. I'm fine. Thinking back to the preps. I'm fine. Everything's fine. It's like a coping mechanism. She's saying she's okay when she's really not okay. Just like it's fine. Just let it go. It's not that big of a deal. We can get past this. And as soon as this is going on, like War Devil just pops back up and says, "Don't walk shoeless. Our feet hurt." Bullying is a commonality in communities without social fluidity, both human and devil. Shall I take care of it for you? And even then, Asa just says, "No, I said I'm fine. Y- You are not fine." And when I heard that, I initially thought, I said heard. When I read "You are not fine," I took that initially as a War Devil saying it. And then, get the next panel, and we see Yuko like catching her breath, like huffing, huffing. Yep, going shoeless hurts. All right. Which, again, kind of throws off Asa a little bit. Here, Asa, I'll lend you one of my shoes. If you wear one shoe, only one of your feet will hurt. With the classic thumbs up, she's like, "What? No, seriously, I'm fine. Um, I mean, I don't need it. Then give it back to me, huh? Come on, give it back. Wait, your shoe? Are you kidding? What is with? Hey, wait! Ow, ow, ow! Hey, wait. So she's kind of like chasing after Yuko. 1 foot, 1 foot. It's interesting, and it's actually here's something I didn't catch until someone brought it up shortly after the chapter came out. And that was simply the fact that this panel right here, where you have the garden and everything, it's not the same panel per se. It's how it's presented. It's very reminiscent of Look Back because when you have the two girls crossing the street, um, it's drawn in a very specific way where they're crossing the street with same running poses and everything. So it's kind of like in chapter one where when you had War Devil do what she did, that was very reminiscent of what happened to Yuta in Goodbye Eri. Just that particular panel shot. And this is very similar too. This panel right here with Yuko and Asa running is a callback to Look Back, which I think Look Back comes out sometime in October, I think. So that's gonna be pretty cool to own. But we see this, they're running through the garden, and we're seeing kind of like a rundown house, if you will. Now, initially when I saw this, I was like, "Is this Denji's old house?" And then I'm thinking, "No, it probably isn't." Whew, this is my house. Want to come in? Uh, no, thanks. Here, take the other one too. I have extra. Now, both of you will be protected on your way home. And she's saying that as Asa's like, just trying to wipe the sweat off her face. No, 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 no. I don't need your shoes. Then sell them. If they won't sell, you can just throw them away. Which, okay, there's two things here with Yuko. Possibility A is she could be Denji in disguise. That's a possibility. Or we're gonna get a death here pretty soon. Because if we know Chainsaw Man, specifically part one, we know that the way Fujimoto writes a story, especially when it comes to character deaths, it's unpredictable. It's very much like Ishida from Tokyo Ghoul. And I want to say Isayama, at the very least, up till the War for Parody arc, like just shortly before the rumbling happened. So it's kind of like that where this could go either direction for Yuko, where she could possibly be Denji in disguise, or she's gonna bite the bullet here because we're seeing kind of like this wholesome moment, and then I'm kind of thinking, wait a second, hold on. If there's one thing we know about Fujimoto, whenever something wholesome happens, go two directions. I mean, for crying out loud, what happened to Power in part one? It's still something that kind of runs through the back of my mind. And actually, here's the thing: her being Denji in disguise, I think would kind of be like a nice subtle way for um Denji to still be actually a part of the story, because it showcases that Denji has actually been a part of the story the whole time, as far as part two is concerned. It's just that Fujimoto was just playing with us. It could be like that. Kind of, I don't even want to say this was a good example, but kind of think of how Isayama didn't have Aaron pop up like right off the gate in the time skip of Attack on Titan after chapter 90. Like it took a few chapters before we got Aaron again. And it could be this situation too. Maybe you could even say this is like a Heise Sasuke situation. Going from Tokyo Ghoul to Tokyo Ghoul. It could be that too. Could be. That is definitely a possibility to take into account and consider. But you know, moving forward, um, you see Asa, and then you see a field. She's walking through, and this is actually a really nice shot with the street sign, with the lake, a few buildings in the background. She's walking, looking down, and then you have the War Devil ask, "Shall we go sell those?" Like just talking about the shoes, and Asa just says, Are you an idiot?" Which is where the chapter ends. And like I said, for a big milestone chapter, I could see where a lot of people could get disappointed. Where it's like, really? Like, we're this is like a big moment in the story, and we're getting a chapter like this. But I think looking back, this chapter is going to have a lot more weight to it than, what we're having. And I'm saying that because even when you look at like other series, like I brought up Attack on Titan just recently. Marley was those early chapters of Marley were pretty good, but they held a lot more weight once we got to the conclusion of that arc. And I think this is going to be very similar to that too, where this chapter, it may not seem like much on the surface, but what we get moving forward is definitely going to heighten this. Another case I could bring up, and again, I brought up Tokyo Ghoul Reach recently, but there were a few downtime moments in Tokyo Ghoul Reach where at first you're kind of like, these are cool chapters, but we're just waiting for like the big thing to happen. And when you look back on Tokyo Re and you look at like those downtime chapters, it really elevates it in a big way. It really does. So that's how I'm viewing this with Chainsaw Man. Chapter 100, Chainsaw Man Part 2, Chapter 3. I do like that we're still focusing on Asa. And so far, based on these three chapters, it is showcasing to us that at the moment, Asa is going to be our MC. If she remains our MC for the entirety of part two, I would be okay with that. I would honestly be okay with Asa being, the main character of part two. Or if anything, she could very well be, our MC of, this current opening of part two. But when Denji does hop back into the story, and I do feel like we're gonna get Denji here pretty soon. Maybe I don't know about if it's gonna be chapter 4, but maybe say between chapter 5 and chapter 6. Maybe chapter 7 if I'm estimating this correctly. But keep this in mind. This is only the beginning of volume 12. If we're chronologically linking all this together, this is still like the first few chapters of volume 12. So either we get Denji in the middle of volume 12 or we start seeing him towards like the end portions of volume 12. Actually, now that I think about it, because this is a devil hunting club that she's a part of, Devil Hunters Club, if you will, who's to say Denji doesn't pop up during one of these activities? Just a food for thought. Like, it is something that just kind of crossed my mind right now. I'm like thinking, well, yeah. And again, I like how we're so slow going everything. How in chapter two we got Yoshida like right off the gate, and then again this chapter we don't really get so much as far as like reintroductions go because we still don't know about where Kobeni is. There is, if I remember correctly, not Aki. Why am I blanking on names right now? Well, they again, Denji is still kind of like 50-50 right now as far as where he could be. But the big thing with this chapter, I could say, is Asa, her internal struggles, if you will, that's still been going on since chapter two. Um, just a brief little conversation she was having with Yoshida, and then of course the remainder of this chapter being heavily focused on her and the War Devil, and by proxy, her and Yuko kind of formulating a bond, if you will. It's not like a straight up like, oh yeah, we're BFFs, but I could see this being where Yuko is gonna play an impact on Asa's life moving forward. I do see that. Again, whether Yuko is Denji or Yuko bites the bullet, either one of these two scenarios, Yuko's gonna play a big part for Asa. I do see that, and vice versa with the War Devil too. And again, Asa at the moment, we're still kind of in a crossroads state where the War Devil kind of has her, by the chains, if you will. Like there's like this invisible chain that's around Asa, and the War Devil says, "You help me, I'll help you." And even if with that said, I don't buy that 100% because there is something there that makes me go like, "Hmm, okay." But overall, if I'm to give the chapter rating, because I don't want to drag this out any further than what we're already doing. The last two chapters, the first two chapters of part two, I gave pure perfections. I'm not gonna give this chapter pure perfection. It was still a really good chapter. I would even argue it's a great plus chapter. What really kept it for me was, like I said, the conversation Asa was having with the War Devil. That little moment between Asa and Yuko, and then of course just that inner turmoil that was going through her head. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this chapter a great plus, and maybe slightly I'll bump it up to an amazing. It's an amazing chapter if I'm to stretch it a little bit. So it's an amazing chat. It's a great plus to an amazing chapter of Chainsaw Man. And while we didn't get much on like story progression, I will say in terms of like character interactions and like characterizations, I think that's where this chapter like really, really highlights a lot for part two. And honestly, that's all I gotta say when it comes to Chainsaw Man Chapter 100. Let me know what you guys' thoughts were on the chapter. What was your favorite part about the chapter? Do y'all still miss Denji, or do y'all think that Denji is Yuko in disguise? And aside from that, guys, that's pretty much it. I'm Lucky T7. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more Chainsaw Man, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow when Chapter 101 drops. Peace and have an amazing day.